So remember I said if you're going to make one, make two, because I have the first pattern. I have another blanket. And again, this blanket is substantially smaller. So the green blanket that's underneath the gray blanket. The gray blanket is the one that's going to get done first. And the green blanket's going to get done. So I have all of my pieces laid out on here. The only thing I don't have figured out, because of the size of the guy and the size of the blanket being smaller than the gray one, I'm going to have to use this material in the middle to figure out what I'm going to do at the collar. This other guy wants a traditional Anorak, so he's probably not going to get a 2-ply shoulder like my son's, because I just have more material. He could get 2-ply. I could put something underneath. I have material left over from the gray blanket that I'm going to use in the pocket. So I don't really want to take more of this green material for the internal hand pocket because nobody's really going to see it. So the internal hand pocket may actually end up being the same gray color. And then whatever left over, then I'm going to piece together creatively to figure out how to do a nice collar for it. So there you have it. So all the pieces of the other one, with the exception of the internal hand pocket and the neck piece, are all here laid out in this other blanket. I'm marking it with the chalk. As you can see, I'll cut it all out, and then I'll start designing. I'll probably put the hood together, and then I'll start designing how I'm going to attach the hood to the vest of it. And again, with the vest part, it's just 2 squares. Once you get, you can contour in the shoulder to meet the sleeve. There's things that you can do with it. So now that I have it, mostly marked up, I'll pull the gray off. I'll cut out the pieces to the green. I actually have another blanket, and I may actually mark up the other blanket with like the hood, the sleeves, the kangaroo pouch pocket. I'll have to see how big that blanket is, because if I'm going to do 2, I might as well do 3. And if I have 3 blankets, I might as well mark it up while I have the pieces. So I am also going to bring up the canvas, so I can cut the canvas into these same pattern pieces. And then I'll be able to use that for future reference and save it. I pulled apart a hooded pullover that was like I mentioned earlier, the bullshit Anorak that I got from China, where they sort of defrauded me out on Facebook, claiming it was a wool Anorak, and was not even close to wool Anorak. It was just a cheap poly fleece that you could get for $25 anywhere. So that's what started this. I'm like, I'm going to make it myself. At least I'll know the materials that are going into it. And I had pulled it apart. I can't find it. I don't know what I did with it. I don't know if I threw it out. I was hoping to have that so I could figure the sleeves out. But the sleeves will just kind of come together. Once you tube it and you start to connect it onto the vest area, it's flexible. The material's flexible. All I want it to have happen is the guys can get their arms in it. And the only issue, if you'll notice, a lot of this type of fabric in a garment, they almost always line the areas of the sleeve so you can get your arm in and out. So you're likely to have something on underneath it. And when you go to stick your arm in, I'm wearing a flannel shirt right now. So this flannel shirt going in and out of the sleeve, it's just going to drag. And it's going to be hard to get your arms out and even your body out. Sometimes you really have to shimmy yourself out of this stuff if you're not actually wearing something more sheer, if it's not lined. So I think that's the only downside with some of these materials is, what are you going to line it with? I mean, obviously the whole idea of having the wool is not to have the poly. So you don't want to line it with a sheer poly. You have to find something else. You don't want to use cotton. They do make wool more sheer. Maybe you could use silk. And the whole idea is this fiber is kind of self-cleaning and you don't really get smelly in it. So I will be out online today trying to find a more sheer wool product that is kind of, how's it, mercedized? I'm trying to remember the name of it, but I also don't want a whole lot of chemicals, but that's the concept. At least maybe line the inside of the sleeve so that it's easier to get on and off. Or then you just have to button up the side. That's why we wear jackets, right? Because they're easier to get on and off than pullovers. And you go to pull this back over your head and you usually pull your shirt off with it. So I'll be working on that concept. I had like some silk. I did buy some cotton. I don't really want to use cotton. Like I said, I'd rather use something else on the inside of the sleeve to keep up the benefits of the wool. When I find something, you will see it later on in this video because that will be going in the key places so that putting on and removing the anorak is an easier task. So I have a third blanket, and this third blanket probably going to make another one for myself or maybe another friend. My wife's like, why don't you just buy a pattern? And I get it. You could try to buy somebody's pattern and it may make it easier. But at the end of the day, if you're tailoring something, it's part of the creative process, right? I have a vest. The vest has basic dimensions of me built into this vest. This vest fits me. And then you can just lay it out, mark it up, double it up, right? So you have front and back. And then you can look at how actual professional garment makers join fabric. And then you do it that way. So I'm going to take the patterns that I have already. I'm going to scale it to my size down from my son, who's monstrous. And I'm going to make another hooded pullover. Then the other ones I can make them better. I can give them away. I can sell them. I can keep them. I can do what I want with them. And the whole idea is through repetition, you get better at everything you do, at least conceptually. I should get better each time I make one of these. So this is a nice blanket. I think I spent more on it than some of the other blankets. The first blanket, that military blanket with the stripe on it, that other green blanket, I don't believe it's as high quality as this blanket. And that's fine. Start with whatever material you want to. I probably wouldn't use a high quality material on the first one you make in case you make some mistakes. But that's up to you. The better your pattern, the closer it should fit to you. And then it just comes down to how you order putting the piece together when you sew it up. And that's probably the harder part, right? I don't know. It's all equally fun. So I wouldn't call it hard. So let's just go. I'm going to mark this up. I'm going to lay the other stuff out. And I think this blanket's a little bigger than the green one that's underneath it. And then I will take them down and cut it. Because you can see this is more of a press fabric, and this one has more of a weave in it. Right? See the difference? One has more of a weave in it. I think ultimately this could end up being a more durable one, but who knows? I have no idea. These old military blankets, they seem to last forever, even though this is a new version of the military blanket. But, we'll knock it out, get 3 of them ready to go, and then we'll start stitching them up. At this point in the video, it's worth showing you the first Anorak pullover that I made. And I started off with this. I have a whole other video on this. I started off with this. All I did was design this collar piece. And then the whole rest of it came together after that. This one I did the same kind of dual pocket, but inside of here I do have a D-ring hook. Some of my stitching wasn't awesome. I can go back and correct it either hand stitch or on the machine. And that's the beginning. This is the first one I ever made, and I think I like the design that I put into it. So this is a 2-ply situation. Inside of here, I had an old overcoat that the lining had come out of, and I was debating whether or not just to try to reline it. And I have 2 brand new overcoats that I got like a Macy's sale. So I was like, you know what? This is just going to be a warmer version. And so it's 2-ply, and it is warmer. But again, loft makes probably the most difference. This is plenty warm down to 30. And like I said in other videos, guys will talk about being able to be out in Alaska in one of these. I don't know. I probably wouldn't want to be. I would want to have something warmer. I would want to have, the upside and downside of down. Down is a fantastic insulator. You don't want to get it wet, but man, if you can keep it dry, it'll keep you warm. So, what I did with this is I have a detachable hood. So this has a collar, and I modeled the collar from the collar of the overcoat, and that was a bear to stitch in. And you could see like this, I actually used the overcoat in kind of the traditional Anorak style where that comes across, and you can still see the original buttonhole there. And then I have this hood that I made to snap on. And I'll say the one thing that I learned about snaps is this: a single ply of this wool is not suitable for a snap. It just won't hold. I think I did a more serviceable job of the original buttonholes on this one, probably because the fabric was thinner. But all the modern machines have buttonholders on them. That's the only downside of some of the old machines is they have buttonholing attachments. If you don't have a zigzag machine, you're probably not. I don't know how you do a buttonhole personally, but both of these, I have the cinch string across the center, and because of this is like cashmere and wool. I mean, this is a nice thing, and you could probably go to an old, not to an old, like to a surplus store or to a Goodwill or something, and buy wool for $5. Buy an old jacket; it's almost ready to go, and you can just start to upcycle it into your own garment. I really like the buttons that I chose on this one. You can see in the buffalo nickel. That's why I always argue. People are like, if they're called bison. I'm like, well, that's what the British call them. I call it buffalo. This is the American buffalo, and it's the buffalo nickel. So it predates people starting to call it the bison. Whatever. That's the British and their desire to name everything in the world, and we got to comply. Everybody makes fun of me when I call it the buffalo and the Buffalo Bills, and they call themselves the bison meat. Right? Who cares? I did line the inside of this hood with one of those. I don't know, it was probably a waste of a good scarf, but you can see I put hook and loop here, and the concept there is have another piece of fabric that I put across the front of it so I can stay warm. So this has hook and loop on the other side, and if I wanted to, if it was really windy or cold, I could attach it to the inside of the hood and then create like more protection for the face. But this is kind of sloppy. I need to sew some of this stuff down in here. But, whatever. Actual first attempt, and it worked. It came out. I got it done. It's sewing up in the shoulder and in the collar and everything else was tough. And I did some hand stitching in there. I used the machine as I could. Hopefully these Singer machines that I got with a bigger area to move fabric cut through it, I think I should be fine. So that was the first one that I made. And so I'm going to mark up this other blanket. It's probably not going to be like this one. It'll be something else. It'll be another one. I do like this collar, the way this works. This other one will probably be just a hoodie. I was thinking, another hoodie, or I could make one that's just one with a traditional collar, but I already have this one. I don't know. Eventually I'll probably make a cloak or something with buttons that's easy to get on and off. I'm going to make a vest. My wife got me a nice Filson wool vest, and I'm going to make some of those too, so I can tailor some stuff just to make it, just to learn how to do it, just to get back to doing stuff myself versus paying somebody else to do everything in our lives, right? You can make it, then you can save money, and it's fun. Here you can see I have the third blanket pretty well marked up. So I have the two panels of the vest right here and here. So that's the primary part of the jacket. The hood came together right here. So I am going to, this is the center of the hood right here. I am going to use that as like a center black stripe down. I don't know, put some kind of design feature on there. Who knows? You can flip it too, like it's muted on one side and, oh, maybe that's not true. Is that? Yeah, it's like a muted stripe and a dark stripe, which is kind of cool. So this, that'll have a muted stripe. Whatever. So the pocket, yeah, no, that'll match. Okay, so that's cool. Actually, I could pull that over. Anyway, so the sleeves are over there. So we have the vest, and if it has a stripe on there and you want to try to incorporate it somehow, I'll see how this works on the sleeve. So both sleeves will have a stripe on them. Maybe it'll look cool. Who knows? And so in the center here, I have all this extra material now that I'll use for attaching the hood, doing some kind of collar like I did on that other jacket or the other anorak. I'll do something. So I have enough room. I could lay out that whole other thing there and do the two-ply shoulder like I was going to do with the gray one. But I may wait to do the gray one first. And then when I get that more refined, I'll bring it in and I'll put it on the rest of this remnant of the wool. But I'm going to take both these blankets. I'm going to cut them up. I'm going to lay out the pieces. And we're almost to the sewing portion. Yes? Yes? Being very aggressive. So here we are. The pieces have been cut. I'm down at my Singer sewing machine. I recently got this one. It's a 1591. They call it the farmer's machine because it's very durable. This one has what's called a pop motor at the back. So it has a worm drive. It's not run by a belt. No downside if you have one that's run by a belt. The kind of benefit is that they're a little stronger. Like this should be able to run through leather with the proper needle on there. Good machine. Really quiet. Eventually when I get set up with the tripod and the camera, I'll just do some peaceful minutes of sewing for you. Just listening to the machine run. But all I wanted to show you right now is that, okay, my measurements was good. This is the center part of the hood. This is the front part of the hood. I pinned it up all the way down to the bottom, almost a perfect measurement. And now I'm just going to run the first stitch. This will be the first stitch I'm running on this pullover anorak. And I'm pretty excited. This is fun. It's the first line of stitching on one of my new machines here. I've kind of played around with it. It is a very strong machine. It can go through layers of blue jean, like multiple layers. It can go through leather. The thing about leather is the thicker the leather, the more you want a sharp point needle that's going to push a hole in. I watched some videos. You can watch some videos on it too, and then you can select your appropriate needle for the work that you're doing. I think we're going to be okay with this. I just picked up another sewing machine, but it has a walking foot attachment. I'm going to try it like this. I ran my other anoraks that I made, and I ran it through the little brother machine that I have, and I didn't really have any problems. But they have different, they're called feed dogs, the sharp little metal things that work with the foot to pull the material back. So that's the only thing on this. You want to make sure that you're able to move the fabric easily through so you don't get lots of caught stitches where it starts to loop and you get all tangled up and then you waste a lot of thread. Okay, so I'm going to run the first stitches through here, show you what they look like. So this is going to be the inside of the hood, and then this will get folded over, and then over it I'll use some kind of I'm going to line this hood.
with a material very similar to what I lined my other hood with, but it's on order. It's a it's a different kind of wool. I don't think it's a blend. I think it's 100% wool, but it's a stretchy wool. Some of it is the way the fibers are woven together and the type of fibers and all that kind of stuff. So it's going to be a lined hood. I'm probably going to line. I'll see how far it gets. It depends on when the lining comes, but I'm not going to get too far in the sewing before I line it. So I'm going to put on the center and the two side panels, and then when the other wool comes in, I will line it, but I could get as far as possibly. I'm not sure if I'm going to fold it over and stitch it, or if I'm going to fold it over and stitch it with the liner. I'm going to watch some videos and see what the best route to do that is. But let's get this first row of stitching in. I'll show you what it looks like. We'll pin up the other side. I'm just using regular push pins. I find it's pretty easy to get through the machine. It holds the fabric pretty well together. And then we'll do the other side and we'll have a hood. I can try it on. So with a couple of fits and starts, I got the center panel stitched up to the side panel. What I have here is one thing about this vintage machine. I don't know if you see those feed dogs in there. Some machines have more feed dogs. And when you're running a thicker material through it, I had the thread or the stitch count per, I don't know if it's inch or whatever it is, too high, and then the feed dogs really kind of move only subtly, and it doesn't really pull this fabric through there. So, I mean, ideally, I would probably have a walking foot. That's when the top and the bottom are both working together to pull the material through. The machine I just bought has a walking foot attachment for the sewing machine. Figure out how to do it, but once I set the proper stitch length, I didn't really have any problems. It took me like 3 tries. It got a little tangle, but once I got it going, I don't know if you can see it, if it'll focus, there's a pretty nice stitch here. This is a nice machine. I mean, I'll go through my machines and I'll take a look at the feed dogs and see which ones have the more kind of aggressive feed dogs. If they're all the same, they're all the same. This is a nice machine. It's very smooth. It's very quiet. It does a nice job of sewing. This is just me being a rookie and getting stuck a couple times. And what ends up happening is if the tension was wrong, so you start grabbing a little too much thread, or the stitch length was too short, so it ended up bunching up, like, because it wasn't pulling the material. So you can help it. This does have a reverse on it, so if you want to do back tacking, it's often done to keep the stitch in. But this is actually going to have another stitch where it's going to be folded over, and then it's going to be stitched down when I get the other material on it. So you get this spread out, and then I'll fold it back and I'll stitch it down again. So on the inside it'll be nice and clean. There's another way you could go. You could lay the stitch out, but for me this is a warmth garment, and I did run 2 different lines of stitching along here to reinforce this seam, and it's going to get 1 more, and then I'll clean up any of these loose threads. But they're going to be underneath the inside when I put the liner on it. So I'm not really too concerned, and it's my first time using this machine on this heavy fabric. I'll mess around with some of the extra pieces of fabric that I have with the presser foot and see if I can get that to work well. But it's really not a big deal. It's a nice machine, does beautiful stitch, it's very quiet, it's easy to use. Once you get the tension right, so you have your tension knob up top, and the spool, I'm having problems with this spool up here, not staying where it needs to be, but we'll get this all figured out, and it's going to be fun. It's going to be easy to use. I apologize for sort of pointing it in the wrong direction. I don't have a cameraman, and I'm not the best cameraman for myself while I'm chit-chatting. All right, so there's the hood. I put it on, and it's really quite large, and that's okay, because it's going to give me, I'll have plenty of material to do, like the fold over at the front, the top, and I'm going to match it up to a hood from the other garment that I was working from and see how this compares to the size of that hood now that it's together. And I can always make it smaller. I could always tighten it up, turn more of this under here, and this will just be, by doing that, um, it'll stand up better. There'll be more material, and it can actually probably have it tack up a little bit more and be more structured. So I'm not unhappy with it. It's my first bit of sewing after quite a long time. I can always cut it smaller, which is fine. It's hard to go from too small and making it bigger without adding material. So I'm actually happy with this. I'll get this one dialed in, and this will impact what I do with all the other hoods and with my pattern. So getting one done is cool. I'm happy with it. I'm happy with the sewing machine. I actually did quite a good job once I worked out my issues with just getting started and letting the machine run. It really makes a nice stitch. So, all right. So it begins. It's already late. It's time for me to go to bed. And we'll do more sewing up tomorrow. And I'll add this to the video. And I'll probably cut it up into parts because I'm just doing it in like 3-minute increments, as you can tell by each of the times I start talking and adding new stuff.